Have you ever imagined going back in time and meeting incredible creatures that lived in ancient Egypt? Egyptians not only live with majestic lions and imposing elephants, but also with animals so unique that today they only exist in the dusty pages of history. Among the golden sands of the desert, they shared their lives with beings who not only inspired myths and legends, but also disappeared, leaving a void in the landscape they once dominated. Discover with us these creatures that, despite being extinct, continue to enchant us and teach us about the special relationship between humanity and nature. Get ready to travel on a journey of discovery and nostalgia, where we will uncover the secrets of the animals that once walked alongside the pharaohs. Let's remember their stories together and understand how we can preserve wildlife for future generations. Come with us on this exciting journey through ancient Egypt and its unique fauna. Before we move on to our fascinating story, check if you have already subscribed to our channel. This helps me strengthen my work and continue bringing you news. In 2015, when the University of Michigan decided to create a magic word, Egyptomania, they invented this term to talk about the enormous passion that many people have for ancient Egypt. And you know what? It's not difficult to understand why. Imagine a place where the sun shines brightly and gigantic pyramids touch the blue sky. This is Egypt, a country full of incredible stories. This civilization began more than 5,000 years ago, around 3,150 BC, and lasted more than 3,000 years. Think about how long that is. It's as if a story continues to pass from father to son, and from son to grandson, for thousands of years. Egypt is famous for many things, but perhaps the most impressive are the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza. These mysterious buildings are like sleeping giants in the desert, guarding secrets of ancient pharaohs. And the pharaohs were like kings and queens who wore shining crowns and lived in magnificent palaces. One of the most famous of these queens was Cleopatra. They say she was as intelligent as she was beautiful, and knew how to speak many languages. Cleopatra was the last ruler of Egypt before the country became part of the great Roman Empire, after her death in 30 BC. Just imagine all the magic of ancient Egypt entering a new era. Egyptomania is like a key that takes us back in time, to explore mummies, sphinxes with lion faces, and hieroglyphs that tell stories on temple walls. It's as if ancient Egypt left us a hidden treasure, and we love unearthing every bit of this fascinating story. So the next time you hear someone talk about ancient Egypt, remember the word Egyptomania. It's such a great love for such an ancient and incredible civilization, which still enchants us today and makes us want to know more and more. Fascinating, isn't it? Imagine a time far, far away when ancient Egypt was growing and building the incredible pyramids. At that time, the world was very different from what we know today. The ancient Egyptians were inventing new and incredible things in almost every field, such as science, art, and engineering. The Egyptians built grandiose temples and created hieroglyphics, a writing full of drawings and symbols that told their stories. They also invented papyrus, a type of paper made from plants, and even some of the earliest forms of medicine and mathematics. But it wasn't just what they did that was wonderful. Earth was also a much wilder and more natural place. While the great pyramids were being erected, woolly mammoths were still roaming around. Can you believe? These hairy giants, resembling huge, fur-covered elephants, lived in some parts of the world even while the Egyptians were building their monumental pyramids. Just imagine seeing a mammoth walking in the distance while workers lift the giant stones. Almost all countries were very different from what they are today. Egypt, for example, seemed like another place. In the early days of ancient Egypt, the climate was colder and wetter, very different from the hot desert we know now. The banks of the Nile River were green and fertile, full of plants and animals that we no longer see there today. Crocodiles, hippos, and exotic birds were part of this vibrant and lively landscape. The seasons were also different. The floods of the Nile, which occurred every year, made the land around the river even more fertile, allowing the Egyptians to plant and harvest their crops. This helped feed all the people and allowed them to build their cities and monuments. So when we think of ancient Egypt, we are imagining a world of great inventions and also a wild and magical nature. It's as if we were traveling to a fairy tale, where woolly mammoths walked alongside giant pyramids, and the world was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Fascinating, isn't it? Furthermore, the Egyptians built almost their entire civilization along the Nile River, which at that time was much greener and full of life. This happened because there were not as many human interferences as there are today. Because of this, the ancient Egyptians lived surrounded by lush nature, full of plants and animals that we no longer see there today. For example, they could see huge crocodiles swimming in the river and hippos cooling off in the waters of the Nile. There were also many colorful exotic birds flying through the skies and a wide variety of fish in the river waters. Some of these animals still exist in other parts of the world, but many of them have completely disappeared from Egypt and some even from the planet. One such animal that no longer exists, at least in the wild, is the woolly mammoth. These giants, resembling huge elephants covered in hair, walked around some parts of the world while the Egyptians were building their pyramids. It's impressive to imagine a world where these incredible animals lived alongside one of the most fascinating civilizations in history, isn't it? So when we think of ancient Egypt, we are imagining a place full of life and natural wonders, where civilization grew in harmony with nature around the majestic river Nile. Fascinating, isn't it? I'm going to tell you a really cool story about an incredible lion called the Barber lion. Maybe you've heard of it, but I bet you didn't know that it's also known as the Egyptian lion. In ancient times, it was found throughout Egypt, living in deserts, mountains, and even near the Nile River. Just imagine many years ago, the ancient Egyptians walked through these lands and could see these majestic lions. They were true giants, with some measuring over 8 feet long. These lions were so large that if they stood upright, they could be taller than most people today. They had a thick, imposing mane, which made them even more impressive. These lions were not only large, but also very strong and agile. They hunted animals such as gazelles and wild boars for food and were masters at hiding in the shadows of the mountains and trees along the Nile River. The wildlife of ancient Egypt was full of adventure and danger, and Barber lions were the kings of that world. Imagine an ancient Egyptian, perhaps a farmer or a traveler, walking along the banks of the Nile at dusk. He hears the mighty roar of a lion in the distance, a sound that makes the earth tremble. This sound, coming from the heart of the desert or the rocky hills, reminded everyone of the presence of these incredible predators. Unfortunately, over the centuries, changes in the environment and human action caused these lions to disappear from Egypt. Today, we no longer see these majestic Barber lions roaming the desert sands or lurking in the shadows of the mountains. But it's fascinating to think that, a long time ago, they roamed freely there. Ancient Egypt was not only home to great pyramids and pharaohs, but also to incredible wild creatures like the Barber lion, which added a touch of magic and mystery to the already fascinating world of the ancient Egyptians. These lions were so large that they could measure up to 4 meters in length from head to tail. In the 19th century, hunters said they were the largest lions of all, weighing around 200 kilos, which is heavier than the lions we know today. Imagine a 19th century hunter exploring the wild lands and suddenly spotting one of these giant lions. He was breathless, admiring the strength and grandeur of the Barber lion. These lions were so impressive that they seemed straight out of a legend. Despite being huge, these lions were not a different species, but rather a special population of northern lions known as Panthera leo. They had an interesting relationship with the ancient Egyptians. Since they didn't live near towns and cities, common people rarely saw them. This caused many to believe that these lions protected the kingdom against outsiders. Egyptian children heard stories about these lions before bed, told by their parents and grandparents. Stories told of majestic lions that roamed the desert, protecting the kingdom from invaders and hunting giant prey. Children imagined these lions as powerful guardians, their manes shining in the sun as they patrolled the lands. Every now and then someone would encounter one of these lions, especially when they attacked farms or livestock. Imagine being a farmer, working in the fields, and suddenly hearing a powerful roar echoing through the hills. The heart beat faster, and everyone ran to protect their animals. But these encounters were infrequent, so most people never saw a Barber lion up close. Even so, everyone knew that they were the most powerful predators in the region. These lions could take down huge prey such as buffaloes, wild boars, and sometimes even elephants. Hunters who dared to face these lions returned with thrilling stories of epic battles. They talked about the strength and courage of the Barber lion, describing how the lion fought bravely until the end. These stories spread throughout the villages, and everyone was amazed at the adventures of these heroes. So just imagine, living in ancient Egypt, you could hear stories of a giant lion that roamed the desert, protecting the kingdom and hunting gigantic prey. Fascinating, isn't it? These lions were not just animals, but characters from magical tales that filled the imagination of the ancient Egyptians with wonders and adventures. I'm going to tell you a fascinating story about the Barber lion and its importance to the ancient Egyptians, especially the pharaohs. At that time, these lions were seen as symbols of power and courage, so admired that they were incorporated into the religion, arts, and writings of the Egyptians. The pharaohs, who were like very powerful kings, saw Barber lions as an inspiration. They wanted to be as strong and fearless as these majestic felines. Some pharaohs even kept Barber lions as personal pets, raised from cubs to be loyal guardians of their thrones and chariots. Imagine the scene. An imposing lion next to the throne, symbolizing protection and power. The relationship between pharaohs and Barber lions was so deep that some pharaohs wished to be buried alongside these magnificent animals. An example of this was found in Tutankhamun's tomb, where an adult lion was discovered, indicating that the pharaoh wanted to carry his protection with him even into the afterlife. Furthermore, in mummification rituals, 5 lions were found, showing how the Egyptians valued these animals even in their sacred rituals. Not just symbols of worship, Barber lions were also challenged by pharaohs in impressive hunts. Amenhotep III, for example, was known for his courage when hunting Barber lions. Over a period of 10 years, he managed to kill 102 of these lions. It was a way to demonstrate his bravery and skill as a leader. Unfortunately, as time passed, Egypt's climate began to change. Fertile lands turned into arid deserts, and excessive hunting led to the disappearance of Barber lions from Egyptian lands. Thus, these majestic felines, which were once venerated as royal guardians and symbols of strength, ceased to exist in ancient Egypt. This story shows us not only how ancient Egyptians viewed Barber lions, but also how the environment and human actions can affect wildlife over time. Fascinating, isn't it? I will take you on a journey through time to meet an incredible animal that once roamed these ancient lands, called aurochs, also known as gold to the ancients. These giants were the wild ancestors of the cows we know today, but make no mistake, they had nothing in common with today's field cows. Just imagine these aurochs were true giants. Some could weigh from 3/4 of a ton to over 1½ tons. That's almost as much as a large buffalo. And it wasn't just their size that was impressive. They had long, slender legs, muscular bodies, and necks as strong as logs. And the horns? Oh, they were huge, much bigger than those of modern cows, looking like real trophies on top of their robust heads. These animals not only looked imposing, they also had a personality to match their appearance. They were like the superheroes of the animal kingdom, symbols of strength and bravery in ancient lands. Just imagine encountering one of them while walking through the ancient landscape. It would be a mixture of fear and admiration in the face of so much grandeur. Unfortunately, over the centuries, these magnificent aurochs disappeared from the land. Their stories teach us not only about the greatness of animals, but also about how the world has changed over the years, adapting to new conditions and transforming landscapes and wildlife. It's truly fascinating to think about how these giants once dominated lands that are now very different. I will take you on a journey through time to meet an incredible animal that once roamed these ancient lands, called aurochs, also known as gold to the ancients. These giants were the wild ancestors of the cows we know today, but make no mistake, they had nothing in common with today's field cows. Just imagine these aurochs were true giants. Some could weigh from 3/4 of a ton to over 1½ tons. That's almost as much as a large buffalo. And it wasn't just their size that was impressive. They had long, slender legs, muscular bodies, and necks as strong as logs. And the horns? Oh, they were huge, much bigger than those of modern cows, looking like real trophies on top of their robust heads. These animals not only looked imposing, they also had a personality to match their appearance. They were like the superheroes of the animal kingdom, symbols of strength and bravery in ancient lands. Just imagine encountering one of them while walking through the ancient landscape. It would be a mixture of fear and admiration in the face of so much grandeur. Unfortunately, over the centuries, these magnificent aurochs disappeared from the land. Their stories teach us not only about the greatness of animals, but also about how the world has changed over the years, adapting to new conditions and transforming landscapes and wildlife. It's truly fascinating to think about how these giants once dominated lands that are now very different. The oro, known as aurochs, were distinct animals from modern domesticated cows. They were less docile and often showed aggression, especially during mating periods. This led the aurochs to live in small seasonal groups, differentiating them from the more social cattle. Despite their imposing nature, the ancient Egyptians valued aurochs for their meat, which was obtained through hunting and considered a valuable resource in the market trade of the time. These animals were kept in small manageable groups, ensuring a stable supply of resources for the community. In the context of ancient Egypt, aurochs were symbols of power and ability, being respected for their robustness and strong temperament. However, over time, these animals gradually disappeared. Today, there are no aurochs left alive anywhere in the world. Traces of these animals were found even in the era of Roman Egypt, but since then they have become completely extinct. Loss of suitable habitat and intensive hunting by humans are believed to be the main factors that led to the extinction of the aurochs. Thus, these ancient inhabitants of the lands left only memories of their strength and striking personality, representing a lost era of animal biodiversity. In ancient Egypt, some species of heron managed to survive over the years, with one of them persisting until 1627 in the remote Yaktiv forest in Poland. However, these herons are now considered extinct. But what really catches your attention is the story of Bennu heron. The Bennu heron was a completely unique and extraordinary heron. Imagine a bird so tall it was as tall as an adult. Fossils and paintings on ancient Egyptian artifacts show that these herons could reach an impressive 2 meters in height. This means that if it were alive today, the Bennu heron would be seen as the tallest bird to ever fly the skies on Earth. In addition to its impressive height, the Bennu heron had enormous wings. Its wingspan could reach over 2.7 meters, which is incredibly large. To give you an idea, this wingspan is 34% larger than that of an ostrich, which is the largest living bird currently known. Thus, the Bennu heron was not only tall, but also a true champion in the kingdom of ancient birds. Just imagine seeing such a majestic creature flying through the skies of ancient Egypt, filling the air with its imposing presence. Really fascinating, isn't it? Paleontologists discovered that the Bennu heron, a giant heron, lived on the damp banks of the Nile River, where it could find an incredible variety of foods. She wasn't picky. She ate agile fish, turtles gliding through the water, leaping amphibians, small mammals that ventured close to the water, snakes that slithered through the grass, and, believe it or not, even baby sheep and sharks that dared to get too close. The ancient Egyptians marveled at the Bennu heron because of its impressive size. It was so large that many believed this heron inspired the deity Bennu, associated with creation and rebirth. Imagine being so great that you are considered a divine inspiration. In Heliopolis, a city where the cult of Bennu was strong, this heron was probably venerated as a powerful symbol. And you know what's amazing? Like humans, the Bennu heron was mummified and buried alongside mummies, an extraordinary honor reserved for few sacred animals in ancient Egypt. Despite all this adoration and symbolic importance, there are still many mysteries about how the ancient Egyptians interacted with these giant birds. They may have been hunted, and the gradual loss of their moist habitats also contributed to their disappearance around 1800 BC. The Bennu heron was not just another bird that disappeared in ancient Egypt. He was truly special, leaving a legacy of mystery and wonder that endures to this day. The ancient Egyptians, with their incredible wisdom and art, left us an intriguing clue about mom geese. This painting, known as Egypt's Mona Lisa for its historical importance, shows these unique geese being offered in a royal ceremony. But the mystery doesn't end here. Despite their vivid representation in art, we have never found a single bone from these mom geese. They were special not only because of their unusual color, but also because they were completely unknown to us outside of this painting. How is it possible that an animal so significant to the ancient Egyptians has so completely disappeared from our records? The mom geese weren't the only ones to disappear. Over the centuries, many animals that ancient Egyptians knew and valued were lost forever. It's a powerful reminder of how our relationship with nature can change over time, and how important it is to preserve the species we still have today. Every ancient painting, like the one depicting mom geese, is a link to our distant past. They tell us stories of admiration and respect for animals, even the rarest and most enigmatic ones. Who knows what else we might discover about these geese and other lost animals as we explore more of the fascinating history of ancient Egypt. Unfortunately, not all animals were welcome in the lands of ancient Egypt. Among them was the North African elephant, a smaller version of the elephants we know today. With their large ears and concave backs, they were an imposing presence, but not as common as the hippos that inhabited the rivers and lakes. Ancient Egyptians looked at these elephants with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. They were larger than many other animals in the region, and their robust size often wreaked havoc on crops and human structures. It was not uncommon for them to be responsible for significant damage, which angered the Egyptians and led them to expel these animals from their natural habitats or even hunt them. In addition to being seen as a threat to agriculture, North African elephants have also been involved in conflicts. In ancient Egypt's heyday, they were used in warfare, a practice that contributed to the decline of its population over the centuries. Even with these challenges, they resisted until the 4th century AD, when Roman imports for public entertainment, such as games and circuses, led to the final disappearance of these majestic animals from the region. In contrast, hippos, although also problematic, found a place in the African landscape that allowed them to survive. Known for their antics in the waters of the Nile, they often caused conflicts with humans by attacking boats and even people. These violent encounters were so shocking that even pharaohs like Nur faced unexpected battles against these aquatic giants. Thus, while hippos continue to exist in modern Africa, North African elephants are remembered only through historical records, leaving a legacy of how interactions between humans and animals were not always harmonious in Egypt's past. In ancient Egypt, hippos were more than just large animals. They were a real headache for the Egyptians. Just imagine you plant your crops so carefully, and then a group of hungry hippos comes and destroys everything. No wonder the Egyptians were so angry with them. The first pharaohs decided to take drastic measures. They spent a lot of time and resources to drive the hippos out of the swamps where they lived. But these stubborn animals didn't make things easy. Even when hunting them in special ceremonies, hippos managed to find refuge in the most remote parts of Upper Egypt, far from cities and towns. The pharaohs did not give up so easily. They continued to chase the hippos, but it was as if these animals had incredible resistance. Even with all the pharaohs' efforts to control them, hippos resisted bravely over the centuries. They were so strong and adaptable that they managed to survive until the early 19th century, continuing to live on the banks of the Nile River and elsewhere in Egypt. And it wasn't just hippos that made ancient Egypt a fascinating place. There were also elegant giraffes, spotted hyenas with their strange laughs, agile addaxes, and smart baboons. All of these animals contributed to the diversity and mystery of wildlife in ancient Egypt, making it a truly interesting place to live at that time. And so we end our journey through the incredible wildlife of ancient Egypt. If you enjoyed learning about these fascinating animals and want to explore more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and watch the full playlist videos. Don't miss the chance to discover more historical and scientific curiosities. Until the next adventure.